So we've now looked at the first two questions here. How do I feel? And am I interested? These both deal with the question of how you get students to focus on the lesson to begin with. How do you make it more likely that their working memory will be focused on your lesson material rather than on other things? The third and fourth questions will look more at how we can keep the students engaged in the material. Once we have their attention, how do we get them to stay focused on it and devote their mental energies to it? In this lesson, we're going to look at the third question. Is this important? Now remember, we're talking here about the student's perception of importance, not the actual importance of the material. What determines the level of engagement of the student is not whether the content is important or unimportant. It's the question, do I believe this material is important enough to warrant my attention? Is it more important than the other things which could occupy my mind? Is it more important than the new car I'm getting next week? Or the fact that LeBron James has just gone back to Cleveland? Or the new puppy we just got? You see, our lessons are competing for the student's attention. If the student believes our content is important, he will be more likely to focus his attention on it and keep his attention on it. If he thinks it's unimportant, or of lesser importance than these other things right now, then he's not going to engage with the lesson. So how can we as teachers help students come to believe that our lessons are important? One aspect of student perception of importance is how things relate to their own personal goals in life. Is this helping me achieve my goals? Is this relevant to what I want to do? Now, I don't want to make this sound entirely me-centered, although I realize that can come across. But even for a Christian, we want our actions to advance toward our personal goals. It's just that our goals are, or should be, biblical goals. The glory of God, the advancement of His kingdom, our conformity to the image of Christ. If something is not moving toward those goals, then it decreases in its importance to us. Of course, student goals can be and often are self-centered. My goal is to impress the girls. My goal is to be the best student in my class. My goal is to earn a lot of money. My goal is to keep my eligibility for sports. And remember that we often have a hierarchy of goals, short-term and long-term. Think about a football team. Their ultimate goal on Saturday is to win the game. But first, they have to score a touchdown. In order to do that, they have to advance the ball down the field. In order to do that, the guard on this particular play has to block the blitzing linebacker to open the hole for the running back. That's the guard's immediate goal. So it is for our students. For Christians, their ultimate goal is to glorify God. But they might have an immediate goal of getting a good grade on Friday's test, and the glory of God moves into the background for now. If they perceive our lesson as helping them achieve their ultimate goal, glorifying God, but not their immediate goal, a good grade on the test, then they're going to be conflicted as to whether they, at that moment, believe the content is important. We need to remind them how their short-term goals, the test, also help them achieve the long-term goal, God's glory, and that truly seeking for the long-term goal will help them with the short-term goal as well. Now that's a lot to swallow, but it shows us the complexity of student goals as they relate to engagement in the lesson. If they perceive that the lesson or material relates to their own goals, whatever goals are most important to them at the time, then they're more likely to engage in the lesson. While obviously we can't guarantee that we can match our lessons to all their personal goals, we can show how our lessons relate to the ultimate goals, glory of God, and how it can relate to more immediate goals, such as good grades on the test. So why is this even a factor in engagement? It's because we all have a drive to dominion. God has created man to exercise dominion, to take charge, and that involves having goals. We all understand that meaningless activities, things that are merely busy work, don't lead to dominion, and so we're not interested in doing them. We have a God-ordained drive to seek goals, to take charge. When we perceive that some activity is leading to dominion, that there's a real, meaningful goal in mind, then we are more likely to engage with the activity. When our students believe that an activity leads to something that will make a difference, whether in their lives or in the world outside, they tend to become engaged in the lesson. Now, students will be more likely to think the material is important if it's somehow connected to their lives. All our students have personal interests, whether that's sports or music or computers or whatever. When we can compare some lesson with something in their world of interest, we're more likely to engage the students. And it's even better if we can help the students make those connections on their own. Some examples. Let's say students are interested in athletics. Well, you might ask them how the speed of an alligator compares to Usain Bolt, or to a wide receiver for the Falcons, or the speed of a pitched baseball. For musicians, you might compare how inflation leads to devaluing of goods to the fact that constant standing ovations at concerts makes those ovations meaningless. Or you might have students make analogies. For example, the heart is to the circulatory system as something is to something else, and they make an analogy with something they enjoy. Then they explain how the relationship is similar. So what we're talking about here is to find some connection between the lesson and some part of the student's lives. Now you have to be sure the connection doesn't come across as contrived, trite, or uninformed. For example, all I know about horses is there are 3 big horse races each year. It's going to be hard for me to connect my lesson to a student who works with horses unless I spend a lot of time reading up on the subject. But especially as the students get older, an effective way there is for me to find ways to encourage the student to find those connections. I might say, Mary, I know you take riding lessons and spend your summers working in horse stables. I don't know much about horses, but can you think of a way our lesson on the circulatory system in humans relates to the circulatory system in horses? How might be the same, and how might they be different? When students are connecting the class lesson to their own interests and work, it can help them learn the lesson better. Now we come to the highest level of student goals, their life ambitions. Once again, I'm going to come across as sounding man-centered, so hear me out. What we're talking about here is the student's actual life ambitions, not what those ambitions should be. If the students are going to engage with the material by believing it's important, it's got to lead him to his personal life goals, whatever those might be. Now, as Christians, we desire that our students' life goals would be biblical goals, to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever, to seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. And we need to constantly hold those out before our students and exhort them to view life in those terms. But if those are not really what the student wants above all, then our lessons which lead toward those goals are not going to engage him. If his life goal is to be a wealthy Wall Street banker, and our lessons focus on the need for self-sacrificial giving and commitment to the glory of God above all else, then our lesson isn't going to meet him where he's at. If a lesson provides him with skills and knowledge of the stock market, he's going to be immersed in it. Now, am I saying that we downplay biblical goals just to be relevant to the students? Not at all. We must hold out before our students the biblical goals for their lives. But what we're looking at here also includes what we might see as secondary life ambitions. See, one student might want to glorify God by becoming a professional musician. Another student wants to glorify God by teaching in a Christian school. Yet another student wants to glorify God by going into the financial world. These life ambitions will vary from one student to another. And this is where the teacher's knowledge of the students, on more than just a superficial level, comes into play. As you know what your students want to do with their lives, you're going to be better able to show them connections between what they're learning and what they want to do with their lives. The third main way to help our students see the importance of their lessons is to encourage application of knowledge. That is, we want our students to see how their learning matters in the real world. This is the universal question, why do we have to learn this stuff? This is not just students trying to get out of work or trying to be obstinate. It again relates to our God-given drive to dominion. We were created to have dominion, to rule, to have an impact on our world, and we want to know that what we do has an impact. Our students have that same drive. They're not interested in learning stuff just to fill up time, or just to get a grade, or even just to pass a course, or just to graduate from high school. Yeah, they might say those things, but deep down they know there's more to life than just graduating from high school and going to college. So we need to show them how their learning connects to the real world out there. There are several things to consider here. First, we need to design cognitively challenging tasks. That is, our work needs to challenge them to think on a higher level. The whole higher order thinking skills discussion comes in here. When students are doing more than just busy work or rote memorization, they invariably begin to make connections to the real world. Now, I'm not saying here that we give more work, nor am I saying that we just make the work harder. If your Bible lesson involves memorizing the first 3 kings of Israel, it doesn't become a cognitively challenging task just if you say, well, memorize all the kings of Israel. And it doesn't become cognitively challenging if you just say, I want you to memorize the names of those kings as they are in Hebrew. A cognitively challenging task is going to vary by age level, but it might be something like, what's the difference between the first kings of the northern kingdom and the last kings? Or it might be, compare and contrast how the kings of the northern kingdom responded to the prophets with the response of the kings of the southern kingdom. Now, our focus here is not just on the right answer. Yes, we're concerned about the right answer. But even more important here is the process the students follow to get that right answer. You see, if you're just looking for the right answer, you can just tell the students the difference between the first and last kings of the northern kingdom and have them memorize it. But that is not training their thinking process or their ability to make those same connections when they're not in your class. So the emphasis must be on those tasks which will make the students think on a higher level about the material and showing them how to do that. And you'll find that when they are doing this, they become more engaged with the lesson. Another element of encouraging application is when we provide choice for the students. Now, how does this deal with application? You see, when students can choose what they're going to learn within limits, or how they're going to demonstrate that learning within limits, they're able to select things for which they see a personal application and use. Giving students several options for an assessment at the end of the unit, for example, allows students to decide which thing, it might be a speech, a written paper, a PowerPoint presentation, or a video, which one fits in better with their own personal goals and skills. They can then see a connection with their own lives and interests. There are several ways of providing students with a choice, and this will vary by age group. First, you might give them a choice of tasks. Give them several options, such as comparing the psychological characteristics of the main character with the main character of another book, or comparing the cause and effect relationship in the text to that of some other book. Or you could make it more open-ended than that. You might give them a goal. Say, I want you to learn how to dissect a fetal pig, and then allow them to suggest ways to achieve that goal. You still need to give them some guidance, and it really only works after they have some degree of a base of knowledge, but it can be done. Second, you might provide them with a choice of reporting formats or assessments. Tell them that they need to show you that they're able to divide a 4-digit number by a 2-digit number. Then let them suggest ways to show you that. They might either take a traditional test, or they might work problems on the board. They might make a class presentation. They might even make a video to tell others how to do it. But allow them to choose how they want to show you they've mastered that material. Third, you might give them a choice of learning goals, but still within your overall goals. For example, if you're studying the book of Judges in Bible, you might have 2 goals for the unit, 2 things that you want them to learn, and then you allow them to choose a 3rd goal that they want to learn about. If you do this, assess them on those personal goals. Ask them, okay, what was your goal? What did you want to learn about? Now tell me what you learned. So these are some ways you can provide choice for the students. Finally, an obvious way to encourage application of knowledge is to give them some type of real-world application. For example, if they're learning about river biomes, they can work on ways to encourage variety and flourishing of different types of life along the riverbank of Little River near the school. See, these wouldn't be staged things, but something that addresses an actual, real-world situation. So to draw this point to a close, remember that the focus here is on helping students see that the content we are teaching is important to them. If they don't see its importance, they're less likely to be engaged with it. Again, remember that what we think is important and what is really important is not at the forefront here. If the students don't believe something is important, they simply are not going to spend the mental energy on it beyond some superficial engagement like getting through the test. Our job is to bring our students to the point where their personal belief of what's important will more and more coincide with what is truly important, supremely knowing and loving God with all their hearts and loving their neighbor as themselves.